Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come. The Haunting on Bly Manor was my most anticipated show of this year. What did I think about it? Do I recommend you all check it out? And is it possible that this story is even better than The Haunting on Hill House? We're going to talk about that and much more. A young governess is hired by a man to look over his niece and nephew at their family country house after they fall into his care. Soon after arriving at the Bly Manor estate, she begins to experience strange occurrences and a grim history starts to unravel. Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot here today to go over my most anticipated show of 2020, and that is The Haunting on Bly Manor. I am beyond excited to let you all know what I thought about this show. Do I prefer this one over Hill House, vice versa? Do I recommend you all check it out? We're going to talk about all that in this spoiler-free review. Before we dive into the details, as you can see on the screen now, make sure you're following me on all my other social media accounts. That way you all can stay up to date with what's going on over here at Movie Files. If you are new to this channel, welcome. Definitely subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my other Netflix reviews, other TV show reviews, movie reviews, live streams, and all the fun things we do on this very channel. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Helps out the channel, but I also really appreciate it. And in the comments, let me know your favorite episodes, your favorite character, your overall thoughts of the show, your positives, your negatives. Did you like Haunting on Hill House more, or did you like Bly Manor more? Let's have some discussions in the comments below. So first and foremost, before I even get into this review, you can watch my review I did for the Haunting on Hill House I did 2 years ago. You can see all my positive things that I had to say about that show. Just to put it in reference, just to give you a spoiler alert, The Haunting on Hill House is one of my favorite shows of all time. I'm a horror fanatic, so I love horror. I love the stuff, number one, that we get with the family, the trauma, the drama, the grieving process, and all the stuff that we go through with that family. But then you throw in, it was legit one of the scariest things I've ever seen. And this is coming from someone that doesn't get fazed by scary stuff. And obviously being scared and horror is very subjective, but I was legit scared of that show. I had sleep paralysis, just like, Nell's character had with sleep paralysis with the bent neck lady. I mean, I still think about that episode and that season. It's incredible. So I was very, very excited about Bly Manor, and I'm so excited to talk about it. So again, this is spoiler free. No spoilers whatsoever, just my overall thoughts, pros, cons, if you should watch it, all that fun stuff in this review. I'm going to leave time codes so you kind of know the topics that I'm going to be talking about in this video. So again, no spoilers, you're safe. No spoilers whatsoever. So I think it's important to say a little background of this show. So it is based upon a horror novella, The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. I believe this came out in 1898. And there's been other adaptations of this particular story. There's been movies. There's been shows. I mean, hell, there was a movie that came out earlier this year by the name of The Turning, which was trash. But that's not what we're talking about today. So it's been told many, many times. And this has been one of the most influential stories in horror that a lot of people take inspirations from. So this is a very important story. And we know Mike Flanagan does not take adaptations lightly, as we saw with Dr. Sleep. So very, very interesting to say the least. So I think it's important to say, guys, before I even go into my positives, my negatives, it's important when this video comes out, the embargo lifts on October 5th. So if you haven't seen it quite yet, I think it's important to let you all know that this show, to compare this to Haunting on Hill House, does this show and Hill House a disservice. This is a completely different story, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's important for you all to know, as I'm showing you all on the screen now, this was a letter from Mike Flanagan. If you can see it on the screen, he says that this is not a horror show. This is a story about love. This is a love story. This is a gothic romance. So if you are going into this season expecting to be just as scared, just to have the same thrills as Haunting on Hill House, you may get that. You do get some of those moments in this season, or this story, I should say, because they're not connected at all. It just happens to be the same director, same creators behind it, some of the same actors, but a completely different story. Do not go in this comparing it to Hill House. So I'm just going to leave that there. Take it as you will. Let's get into this review. So with that kind of being said, starting off with the positives, I was incredibly impressed by the pacing of this show. I think that the show, again, is telling a love story, and in doing so, we'll talk about my positive and negatives of that love story. I think it was important that you don't get frustrated with them trying to rush your story. I never feel like this was rushed. I feel like they were taking their time, and even though there were some moments that didn't really click with me, I still appreciate them telling the story they wanted to tell. So I will start it off with that. The story does such a great job of displaying its characters and how they suppress their fears and how they handle grieving and how they block that pain out. And in doing so, their past comes to haunt them. So that's where the haunting aspect of this, not only this house, but our characters' past demons and things they've done in the past comes back to fruition. So I kind of love that element about this show. Without getting into the spoilers again, there are some Easter eggs that we come to expect from Mike Flanagan in this kind of haunting universe. There are some ghosts in the background that you might have to keep an eye out for, so I'll let you guys know that as well. It's not as, again, fear, horror, scariness. It's not as fearful and not as frightening as Hill House. I'll say that again, and I didn't have my bent neck lady type of moment or sleep paralysis, but there are still haunting images throughout this season. I thought there were some really good chilling moments in this show involving the Lady of the Lake. Without getting to spoilers, the visual effects from some of the ghosts I thought were really well done. So again, even though it didn't get me all scared at night like the Hill House did, I still appreciate the fear factor of this particular season. Transition into the performances without getting into the details of the characters, starting off with kind of the adults of Bly Manor. You have Danny, you have Hannah, you have Owen, you have Jamie, all really rich characters, starting off with Jamie, the groundskeeper of the Bly Manor. I thought that she was going to be very kind of one note. I thought she was going to be very small supporting cast, but she was very integral into the second half of the show. Some of it didn't work, and we'll talk about that later, but for the most part, I thought that Jamie was like the most level-headed person of the entire show. I thought that she had the most kind of duh moments. Like, guys, we need to pull it together. I really enjoyed Jamie's character and how kind of matter of fact of the character she was. She was very logical in the thought process of her of the show and things that were going on. Which transitions into the Owen character, who is the chef of the house. I thought that he was just very charming. There was nothing bad to say about Owen at all. I liked the performance from the character. I loved him and this next character, their relationship, which Hannah, I have to say, I think Hannah is kind of the heart and soul of Bly Manor. I think that her character, she gets her own episode 5, I want to say, which we'll talk a little bit about later, my favorite episodes. But I thought Hannah was such an endearing character. You felt for her, you felt bad for her at times, and I thought that she was great. And then Victoria's character, man. Victoria comes from Mike Flanagan's Haunting on Hill House. She was one of the stars there, and without spoiling things, she had a very integral part in Hill House, and she's just as important in this season. So she is Danny. She is the new nanny. She's the governess. She's taking on these new kids who have lost their parents, who has lost their last nanny, without getting to spoilers. But I thought that Danny, man, she had her own baggage. She had her own demons. She had her own past that comes back to haunt her. So I really enjoyed the story that we get with Danny and her figuring out who she is as a person, having these kind of false feelings for someone in the show that I won't talk about here, obviously. But I really enjoyed the performance from Danny. We'll talk about some stuff I did enjoy with her later, but for the most part, I thought Danny, who is the lead of the show, Danny Clayton, the new governess, I thought that she was a really interesting character. There were some other supporting characters that I'll talk about more later in this review, such as, the uncle, Henry, Wingrave, you have Peter, you have Jessica. We'll talk about them later, but I would be remiss to not mention my favorite characters. The MVPs of this show are the Wingrave kids. I'm talking about Miles and Flora. Let's start off with Miles. Miles, so you have and without getting into the details, man, if you've seen The Turning, if you've read other of The Turning of the Screw, you know that they're two kids and you have this house and you know how this story goes. One of those kids are going to be manipulative. He's going to be, somewhat sinister, and that's Miles, right? But he's such an endearing character. He's so charming. The way he speaks, the way he carries himself. He's almost beyond his age in regards to the mature nature of this character. I really enjoyed the performance by this young man. I believe his name is Benjamin. Him as Miles was fantastic. But then the scene stealer. This little girl, Flora, she was splendid. She was splendid. Once you see the show, you know what I'm talking about, guys. She was incredible. This little girl, when you have kid actors, and this includes Miles, sometimes kid actors, these kids in this show had a lot on their shoulders, and I thought they delivered on everything that was asked of them, whether it be scared, whether it be, being brave, whether it be manipulative, whether it be kind of sinister at times, whether it be just being creepy kids. These kids were great, and Miles, and like I said, my girl Flora, she was splendid. I thought those kids were absolutely the best part of the shows. They were just so rich. They were so fantastic, and I'm just so blown away by they have to be no less. Miles has to be no older than 10, and Flora, I'm talking about the real actors. The Flora character, she had to be no older than 7. They were beyond their years. They were fantastic, and I hope they do more collaborations with the man of the hour, who I'm going to transition into now. The man behind the show, Mike Flanagan, man. I'm looking at Oculus, Hush, Ouija, Gerald's Game, and then one of the most underrated horror films of this past decade, Dr. Sleep. He is fantastic. I mean, I talked about up top, horror on The Haunting of Hill House is fantastic, but man, he's one of those directors, guys, that you can just see the passion. And I'm talking about this season now. The passion just comes off the screen. The lines that are written within the script, the attention to detail on the sets, the characters, the callbacks that are established earlier in the season and make the payoff at the end of the season. He's just at the top of his game, guys. I think he's one of the best directors in the horror genre, and I think that he does such a great job of, there is a similar thread in all of his pieces of movies and TV shows. It is drama. It is trauma. How do characters deal with their past? I think he does a great job of telling that. And again, this story is so heavily focusing on love. And I think that this one, more so than any of his other projects, love really shined through in this story. I thought he did a good job of telling this love story, even though I have some flaws with it, which we'll talk about here in a bit. But I thought that Mike Flanagan knocked it out of the park. He did such a great job of crafting this story. So some of my favorite episodes, without going into the details of the episode, I have to say episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The first half of the show is the strongest for me personally. I think that the story is a little bit more interesting. The characters are so well fleshed out. It sets the stage for a great finale. And I thought that the first half of the show was really the strongest point. And in particular, I think of this one episode, episode 5, which plays with the ideas of dreams, and how, you can relive good dreams, bad dreams, and everything in between, and how our characters dream and how the dreams kind of influence them. And without going into the details, but, it really reminded me how this episode was kind of crafted. It was really beautifully told. It reminded me a lot of the 6th episode of Hill House, which was the two, I believe it was called Two Storms, which was the funeral episode, the one continuous shot. It had similar vibes to that episode 5 of, which was Hannah's story, to say the least. I really enjoyed that episode. So I've been praising this show for the last 10 minutes. Let's get into some of the criticisms here. The show was flawed. It had its flaws. I'll say this. I can appreciate and I can respect the storytelling, the direction, the performances, the sets, all that stuff. But at its core, again, it's a love story, guys. And at the heart of the story, it's a love story. It's the central theme is love. And I don't hate love, but I'll have to say I wasn't all that interested in the love story being told. And that goes for all of our characters. All of our characters had a love story to be told here. Literally all of the characters, without getting into it. I like the characters. I want them to be happy. I want them to have a happy ending, but it was just so melodramatic, especially when it comes to the second half of the show. We get an origin love story. We get, Danny's love story, her past love story, her current love story. All of our characters are going through love. Again, that is the theme. It's love. Is love, guys, of this show. And it just was repetitive, and it just got too dramatic for me at times, guys. Without getting into the details, there's an episode that goes back. It gives us the origins of Bly Manor and how it became to be this kind of, haunted place, and we get a love story within that origin. And don't get me wrong, that episode had one of my favorite characters and one of my favorite actresses that works with Mike Flanagan very closely, and I loved her in the first season of Hill House, and it was great seeing her appear. I won't say what character that is, but it was just like that episode didn't really work for me, because again, it was just like we only spend this amount of time with them, and we're telling again this tragic love story. It just got really repetitive for me. And character flaws, I had mentioned Danny earlier. I enjoyed the character and her arc, but when you get her reveal of her past, I thought it was just like, it was so heavily focused on the first 4 episodes. And once you find out what her past is, I found it to be so incredibly underwhelming, as well as her lack of safety and security for the kids in the second half of the show felt so uncharacteristic of that character, especially after everything we go through in the first half. So I thought that her character had some flaws. I have mentioned that there are some other characters, some supporting characters in this show that are great actors, and they did a good job in their role, but it just didn't sit with me in regards to their story and the payoffs. Starting off with Henry Thomas as Henry Wingrave, who is the uncle of Flora and Miles. Look, Henry's story was the most uninteresting story to me. I found the character to be the most interesting. I thought he was my least favorite character, to say the least. He gets his own episode, which I thought was incredibly underwhelming. To say the least, he was my least favorite character, and whenever we focus on Henry, I felt like the momentum of the show took a kind of a step down, if I'm being honest. And then I think one of the bigger characters in this show, two characters in this show, Peter and Bex, man, Rebecca, their love story. Look, I thought they did a great job in their roles. They did what was asked of them, but at the end of the day, it just didn't connect with me, right? I never felt the chemistry between Peter and Rebecca. I just didn't. I don't know what it was. They're two great actors. You have the character, the actor that plays Peter, who we've seen in the Haunting on Hill House. We've seen him earlier this year in Invisible Man. I'm referring to Oliver Jackson Cohen. I think he's a great actor. Moon Knight, we'll see what happens with Marvel, but him and Becca, man, I just never felt the chemistry. And if I don't feel the chemistry, and it was such an integral part of the story, that stuff didn't work for me. So I don't want to end this on a sour note. Just wrapping up this review. Overall thoughts. Mike Flanagan is an incredible filmmaker. He's an incredible storyteller. He tells beautiful stories about trauma and family relationships, and in this case, a story of love, which I can appreciate the crafting of the story. It was really well done, and all the stuff I mentioned in my positives. But at the end of the day, overall, the story and the character arcs didn't really connect with me, especially the central theme of the love story. It just didn't work. I didn't connect to it, unfortunately. So with that being said, again, I think it's important to note that if you compare this to the first season, you might not connect with it, guys. Again, I think the people that might resonate with this season, if you love story, if you love tragic stories, romance, this gothic romance, I think you might enjoy this. And then if you can separate yourself from the first season, I think you might have a good time with it. But for those that are looking for a follow-up to Hill House, I think you might be slightly disappointed. And for me personally, with this being my most anticipated show of this year, it's not disappointing, but it wasn't what I was looking for. And again, the central theme of love just didn't connect with me personally and the stories that involve that. So at the end of the day, I still recommend you all to check this out because it is Mike Flanagan. I'm a big supporter of his. And I think that even though this maybe should have came out in February because it was so lovey-dovey and melodramatic, I don't think that the horror levels really worked for me. The storylines of the love interest and all the stuff with Becca and Peter and the stuff with Henry just didn't sit well with me. But I still would recommend you all check it out. And when you do, let's have some discussions in the comments below. Let me know your pros, your cons. What were some of your favorite moments, your favorite episodes, your favorite characters? But then also let me know some of your criticisms, guys. Again, we're not bashing the show. This isn't the show I was wanting it to be, but I can still appreciate it as like fine wine, as like a nice piece of art that I can appreciate the art that's on the wall, but it just doesn't resonate with me or speak to me. But let me know your criticisms of this show, and let's just have some great discussions. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? So thank you all for watching this review. Make sure if you haven't already to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my other TV reviews, movie reviews, live streams, all the fun things we do on this very channel. I can't thank you guys enough for the continued support. Check out my Lovecraft Country review that's on the channel right now. Later today we're going to be talking about, or earlier today we talked about the third day, fourth episode, We Are Who We Are. We got the Boys finale coming up this week, so make sure you guys check out that content. Again, thank you for watching this review, and we'll see you all on the next video.